All right, the newsfeed area, we've done this twice already, so we know what we're doing. We're going after article, and we're going after a class rule called news, of course. So let's go and get these guys done. Once again, over into the external style sheet. I'll give myself a little bit of extra space here. And let's go article. Now, what I'm going to do here, and again, you don't have to do exactly the same thing, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set his width to scale, 95% of the overall width, okay? And I'm going to throw in that extra little bit of space on the left-hand side, which we've done a few times already. 10 pixels is what I'm going to use. Super easy stuff. News, which is our class rule, okay? And this guy's going to have a little bit of margin bottom on him, just like so. 20 pixels, if I can get my fingers working properly. There we go. Pretty short and sweet, pretty easy. Again, we've done this several times already, so, it's going nice and fast here. There we go. Nice and spaced apart there inside the browser as soon as I refresh. Okay, so there we go. There's the news feed and the rest of the wireframe. There's only one thing left, and that is the nasty gap of space below our footer. We've done it twice. Do you remember how to do it? Let's go and finish it up. All right, well, if you're thinking of using margin bottom 0 for your footer, you are absolutely correct. So let's go and do this inside the external style sheet. So this is going to be, again, I like to use a compound rule for this, so I'm going to go footer nav. There we go. If I can there we go. All right, there we are. And I'm going to say margin hyphen bottom and 0, of course, just like that. Okay? And let's just make sure that everything is happening here inside the browser, which it is. There goes the gap of space at the bottom, which is great. Again, we'll get into formatting the actual menu items. There's the gap of space on the left-hand side. I want to make these guys a little bit bigger and space them apart and all that good stuff, but that's more formatting, right? So what I'm going to do here, I just want to sort of wrap up this process that we've been involved in here, setting up the 3 media queries and really wireframing things out. I'm going to get rid of all this extra space that I threw in. Again, that was just to kind of give you a better view of my code here. There we are, something like that. So we have all 3 media queries set up for the wireframe, right? So what we would want to do at this stage of the game, very similar to where we were at the end of the Illustrator process, I'll call it, the wireframing process from Illustrator, is we'd want to show this to our boss, to our client, to our coworkers, whoever we're working with, and say, this is how it's going to behave. And they'll say, well, I don't want blue text, and I don't want it to be underlined. You say, well, hold on, that's design. We'll mess around with fonts, we'll adjust sizing and so on later. Before we get to the dress-up stage, I want to make sure that everything is functioning the way you want in terms of how things are scaling, how things look inside the browser window. If I scale it all the way out to, the high resolution, something like this. Let me see if I can get this guy to cooperate here. Crank this guy all the way out. There we go. This is how it's going to look on a desktop computer, This is how it might look on a tablet device. And of course, on a smartphone, perhaps something like this. So let them play with it a little bit. And what you want is confirmation that this is indeed what they're after before moving ahead. Okay, and you'll likely get questions like, well, where's the logo going to go? Well, the logo is going to go where I showed you back when we finished the Photoshop process, right? And they say, well, I want a photo here. I don't want a big gray box. And you say, right, this is the placeholder for the photo. I'm going to drop the photo in there for you, but I just want to make sure that this is functioning the way you want before I take the next step, which is the dress-up phase of the design process. Okay, so now that the wireframing is complete for all 3 media queries, all 3 devices, we can now take what we have here, the structure that we have. Think of a building. That's the metaphor I always use. Now we can start throwing some paint on the walls. Now we can start picking out furniture. Now we can start hanging pictures on the walls as well. So that's what we have next. But of course, that's the metaphor. We're going to be doing this via CSS. Okay, the high-resolution design. I'm sure you're excited to see all of our hard work come together here. So the assumption here, by the way, is that you've been given approval, once again, by your client or your coworkers, your boss, whomever. They are pleased with the way everything is functioning in terms of the wireframe. So now we want to apply design to that wireframe. Okay, so that's where we are. So we're going to get things started here by making a couple of minor adjustments to it would be the high resolution media query, and then we'll jump in and we'll start formatting the header and the main navigation menu and so on. So without further ado, here we go. I'm going to head over to my coding application. Again, I've said this a number of times earlier on and in previous exercises. You really have to be careful here. You really have to make sure that you're in the right media query. Okay, so for us, it's the high resolution media query down towards the bottom of the external style sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my body. Now, this is up towards the top of the high resolution media query. The first thing that I want to do is I want to set a font for the overall layout, the overall document itself. So just after the background there, I'm going to go font-family, okay, like so, and I'm going to use Verdana myself, okay, because that matches the layout that you and I built inside Photoshop the closest. There it is. And you can go ahead and save, and if you want to go and refresh your browser, that's perfectly fine. There's one other thing that I want to do here, though, before I actually go and do that. I'm going to look for my master, okay, just below the body. And what I want to do here is I just want to change his border color. So right now his border color is solid black, and I'm going to change that to a mid-gray. For myself, anyway, for my layout. So I'm going to go 200, 200, 200. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and save and head back to my browser and refresh, and there we go. So just a couple of minor changes here. So I can see that the font has changed throughout my entire document. So we're using Verdana throughout, okay? And I can see that I have a nice light gray border all the way around the outside of my layout. Okay, so that's all I was after in this exercise. All right, now onward to the good stuff. We're going to go after our header and then the menu. Okay, I want to go after the header now for the high resolution layout. And I want to make sure that I use the exact same blue that you and I had set up back inside Photoshop way back when. So there's a few different ways to do this, but here's what I prefer doing. I prefer going back to the actual layout inside Photoshop, okay, which I conveniently have open inside the background. So you may want to go and open up the high resolution layout inside Photoshop to follow along. And like I say, there's a variety of ways to do this. What we could do is we could twist open the header area layer group, and then we could go after the actual header object itself. So don't forget, he has a color overlay applied to him. Okay, so I had to drop down this color overlay, or the layer effect, I'm sorry, I should say, and then that reveals the color overlay. And then I could double click on that color overlay to get myself back inside the layer style dialog box. I'm sure you remember this guy. And there's the color that you and I had set. So what I could do now is I could click on the color swatch and then make a note of the red, green, and blue color values that we used to get that blue. Okay, so typically what I would do is I would probably scribble it down on a scrap piece of paper. I usually keep some, scrap paper handy just for such quick notes. And then what I want to do is I want to go and set up the same color that we've used here inside Photoshop over inside it would be the high resolution media query inside the external style sheet. You still with me? I hope so. All right, if you're not really sure what the heck's going on, here we go. So I'm going to flip over to the coding application into the external style sheet. I am double checking that I'm inside the high resolution media query. This is one of the reasons, by the way, why I stick in these CSS comments. So inside the high resolution media query, I'm going to look for header. Okay, there he is right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look for his background property, and I'm simply going to change the value. So the value that we used back when we were simply wireframing this out is just kind of a mid-gray, 200, 200, 200. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same RGB color values that I scribbled down on a scrap piece of paper that we got out of the dialog box back in Photoshop. Okay. Now, I'm not expecting that you remember what they are. I've already got them written out here for myself. So it's 0, 80, 125. So you can go back and double check that in Photoshop if you want, or you can simply throw it in here just like myself. Go ahead and save up the external style sheet, head back to your browser and refresh, and voila, there we go. There's our blue right out of Photoshop. Okay, perfect, good stuff. Now, this is where things really start happening. We start to see our design coming through inside the browser, which is exciting, and things are really going to start coming together with our main navigation menu, and that is next. Okay, on to the main navigation menu here inside the high-resolution design. Now, I should let you know what I'm shooting for here. What I want to do, what I'm attempting to achieve, is I want to recreate via CSS the same design that you and I created here for the main navigation menu inside Photoshop. Okay, give me just a second. Let me zoom in on this and kind of clear my screen up a little bit. Something like this, okay? So I think we can get pretty darn close to exactly what we've created here inside Photoshop, okay? In terms of the formatting of the menu items. So this is where we're starting, okay? Just the blue underlined text there. We want to make it orange, perhaps a little bit bigger, you know, this sort of thing, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to head over to the external style sheet, of course, and I'm going to look for my nav. Okay, earlier on, you and I had created this nav here, the redefined HTML element there, of course. Okay, and the first thing that I want to do with this guy is I want to change the text alignment on this guy. So I'm going to go text-align, :space center. Okay, now I'm not sure that I'm going to get much of a result here because I'm running such a low monitor resolution here, but let me see what I get here. I'm going to save and refresh the browser. Okay, things do shift around a little bit for me. Now, what I'm winding up getting as well is this massive gap of space. We've seen this a couple of times already, haven't we? On the left-hand side of the menu, let me show you how to get rid of this extra space here. It's kind of a wacky thing that's going on here. It's related to our unordered list that we're using for our navigation menu, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to head back into the external style sheet. And let's see, I'm going to try and keep this in some sort of orderly conduct. What I'll do is I'll give myself a little bit of extra space so you can see what's going on here. So there's the nav. There's the compound rule nav li. I'm going to drop my cursor just above that guy, and I'll give myself a little bit of extra space here. I'm going to create another compound rule, but this one is going to be called nav ul. So this is for the unordered list inside the nav element, okay? And check this out. This is going to be some weird code. It's going to be some WebKit code. I'm going to type in a hyphen and then WebKit, all one word, and then another hyphen and then padding and then another hyphen start. Okay? So this is the padding at the beginning of the unordered list. That's what's giving us this extra gap of space. Throw in a full colon and then type in 0 followed by a semicolon. Okay? And that should do the job for us. If I head back to my browser and refresh, there we go. That extra gap of space is gone, and now the entire menu is nice and centered inside the black nav element. Perfect. Great. Good stuff. Okay. Now it's just the menu items themselves, the formatting on the menu items themselves. And this is actually going to be pretty straightforward. Let's see if we can get this done here. I'm going to head back over to the external style sheet. I'm going to go and create a new rule for this. And once again, it's going to be a compound rule. This time, I'm going to call this guy nav lia. So in other words, a hyperlink inside a list item inside a nav element. Okay? Hope you're still with me there. So it's getting a little bit more complex here in terms of the conditional formatting, if you want to call it that. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to set this guy's color. Okay, so I'm going to go color, :space. I'm going to be using RGB color values. Now, we want to use the same orange here that we had set up back inside Photoshop. So once again, what we would have to do is we'd have to head back to Photoshop and then, get into our layers panel here, for instance, and then get into the navigation menu itself and figure out what color of orange we had set there. Now, I've already figured out the RGB color values for us. If you want yourself, another option is you could grab your eyedropper tool and then sample the orange, something like this, and then pull the orange out of the color picker by clicking on the foreground color swatch, grabbing it that way. That's another way to do it, okay? Now, what I'm going to do, though, is I've already figured out my orange RGB color values that I want to use anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the external style sheet, and I'm going to go and plug in those values. Okay, so I'm going to use, this is the RGB color value set that I'm going to use, 240, 120, 30. Okay, something like that. And then the other thing that I want to do after the semicolon there is I want to get rid of the underline on the text as well. So I'm going to go text decoration. There we are, :space none. All right. And I want to make the text bold. So I'm going to go font-weight, :space bold. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to increase the font size just a little bit. And you might have to play around a little bit with your sizing. I think I'm going to wind up going with 15 pixels though, but again, you're welcome to monkey around with that a little bit. Go ahead and save up your work and head back to your browser and refresh. And there we go. There's a navigation menu that looks pretty darn close to what you and I had created inside Photoshop. And the other thing too I wanted to mention is sometimes, you have to give yourself a little bit of creative license, right? Sometimes you wind up getting into the browser, you wind up getting into the CSS, and you start monkeying around and you go, you know what, I think I want the main navigation menu to be taller. I want a little bit more height on there. Back inside Photoshop, it was a pretty narrow navigation menu there. I decided to increase the height on mine. Okay, so a little bit of creative license there. You can always make adjustments. All right, there we go. There's the main navigation menu. Pretty cool stuff there. Of course, we have the rest of the high resolution layout to go. So let's keep moving here. Okay, let's continue on with the design for our high-resolution layout here. Now, the slideshow would be next, right? But we're actually going to have a whole pile of exercises, a whole set of lessons dedicated to inserting graphics. So I'm going to skip over the slideshow for now. I'm going to leave him as is, and we're going to head all the way down to the 3 content boxes. So if you want, once again, you could head back to Photoshop for a quick reference for your 3 content boxes. So solid blue background there. We'll get these graphics in just a little bit, as I say. So this should actually be pretty straightforward, although I think I want to throw in an extra CSS rule to kind of help us along a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back over to the external style sheet. By the way, what I did before I started this exercise is I decided just to start spacing apart some of the rules inside the high resolution media query just to make it a little bit easier for you to see. So I have the body and the master up at the top there, and then the header and the nav, just trying to sort of group things, kind of logically together. Article and news go together, this sort of thing. I also indented some of my rules there as well. So these guys all belong with nav, for instance. You don't have to do this, but in any regard, I decided to do it. So no changes for our slideshow. We're going to head right down to content box, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Now, what I want to do with my content box is, well, the first thing I want to do is I want to change his background color. So look for your background property there and look for his RGB value there, the 3 RGB color values. I want to use the same blue that you and I had used earlier on. Okay, so in the real world, I'd glance down at my scrap piece of paper and I'd go, oh yeah, 0, 80, 125. That's what we sampled out of Photoshop. And then we can save up our work and we can head back over to our browser and refresh. There we go. Perfect. Now, I want to add a little bit more onto this. I've decided again, I just ran you through a bit of a lecture on creative licensing, right? I've decided to make a change here to my layout. If I head back to Photoshop, the text inside the 3 content boxes is black. And I've decided to change the color of the text to white and maybe even throw on some extra font formatting. Now, you don't have to do this again. This is just what I've decided to do here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a compound rule that is going to control paragraphs, but only if they appear inside a content box. So again, this harks back to the way that we structured our HTML. Okay, so if I head back to my HTML file and I head up to my 3 content boxes, there we have the content box. There's the placeholder text that we inserted, but we inserted that placeholder text inside a paragraph, right? A paragraph element. So now what we can do is we can control this paragraph and isolate it away, if you will, from other paragraphs inside the layout. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, all right, if I have a content box, I'm sticking this in underneath my original content box. So I'm going to say, all right, if I have a content box that contains a paragraph, okay? Or said another way, if a paragraph appears inside a content box. So I've gone dot content box space P. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change his color. I said that I wanted the color to be white. So I'm going to go RGB and I'll say 255, 255, 255. That'll give us white text inside the content boxes, or for the paragraphs inside the content boxes. Let's just make sure that this works. Go ahead and save up your work and head back to your browser and refresh. You should get white text now inside your content boxes. But paragraphs outside of content boxes should remain as they were, okay? So this is a great way for isolating specific areas, specific objects inside your layouts, like paragraphs. Now, there's 2 other things that I want to do to these paragraphs. I want to control their font size, and I also want to throw in a little bit of line height as well, okay? So I'm going to head back over to my external style sheet. I'm going to look for my new compound rule, content box P. I'm going to drop my cursor in after the closing semicolon, and I'll throw in font-size. Now, earlier I used a fixed font size, 15 pixels. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a percentage, 80%. So in other words, 80% of the default font size. So he should be just a little bit smaller than the default font size. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to throw in line height. If you're not sure what line height is, it's the space between the lines, the vertical space between the lines in all of the text. If you're coming from the world of print, if you know what leading is, it's exactly the same, except in CSS, we call it line height. Okay? So line height, and I'm going to say 140% of the default. And of course, closing it off with the semicolon there on the end. Go ahead and save up your work, head back over to your browser and refresh, and we should get something like this. Okay, wonderful stuff. Missing the graphics, of course, but the text formatting itself looks pretty good. Now, you're welcome, once again, if you want to go and fiddle around with these settings, maybe increasing your font size or increasing that line height, whatever you'd like to do. Now, for myself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next area inside our layout, which is our news feed. That's next. The high-resolution design is really coming together nicely, really coming together quickly, which is always nice to see. So we want to go after the news feed next. This is going to be pretty straightforward, pretty easy stuff. What I want to do, though, is I want to zero in and I want to target the titles, the article titles, and also the paragraphs that appear here as well. Now, once again, you may want to flip into your HTML file just to refresh yourself on the structure here. So again, what we have is our article with our news div, and then directly inside the news div, we have an H2. That's our article titles. And then, of course, the placeholder text is sitting inside an HTML paragraph. Now, the reason why I'm reminding you of this one more time is because I want to make use, once again, of compound selectors to control and isolate this material, this content. So inside the external style sheet, I'm going to go and look for article and news. There they are, down towards the bottom there. Maybe what I'll do is I'll indent news there because he's inside article. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these 2 guys as they are, but I'm going to go and create 2 new rules. Let me create the rules first, and then we'll throw in some properties for them. So go ahead and hit enter there, maybe once or twice after news. And I'm going to go .news h2. Okay? So in other words, if a heading 2 appears inside a class called news, which of course it does, right? That's our article title. So there's the article title. And then after that, I'm going to go .news p. Okay, so in other words, if a paragraph appears inside a news class, okay, which of course it does as well. Okay, so these are the 2 new guys that I'm going to go and create. All right. Now let's go and throw some properties into these two fellas here. The first thing that I want to do is I want to change the font that's being used on my H2. Once again, you may want to refer back to the Photoshop layout. It depends on how closely you want to match what you've created over there. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go font-family, :space, and I'm simply going to go Times. So I want to change the font from Verdana to Times, okay? Or said another way, I want to override the font that's being defined further up inside my high-resolution media query, which is Verdana, okay? So that's only going to apply, though, to the H2, but only if the H2 appears inside News. That's, again, sort of an illustration of the power and efficiency of CSS. So there we go. There's the news. No big deal there. I'm going to collapse the space beneath my article titles. If I flip back over to my browser just quickly, there's a fairly large gap of space beneath these guys, and I want to collapse down that space. So I'm going to go margin-bottom, :space, and I'm going to say -20 pixels. So it all depends on how much or how little space you want beneath these guys. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase their font size, so font-size, and I'm going to go 150%. Okay, something like this. Let's see what we get here inside the browser if I go and refresh. There we go, something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So the space is collapsed down, which is nice. I might come back and increase the font size a little bit. I don't know, I might fiddle around with that. This is a nice thing about CSS as well, is nothing's carved in stone. You can always come back and fiddle around a little bit, this sort of thing. The only other thing I want to do here before we move on is I want to simply adjust the size of the text inside the paragraphs, inside the placeholder paragraphs. And that, of course, is all going to take place inside this new compound rule that we created called newsp. And I'm simply going to do something like this, font-size, and I'm going to say, all right, make this text 90% of the default font size. Now that might be too much, it might be too little, who knows? Get into the browser there and see what you get, and things might be absolutely perfect for you. Who knows? Okay, good stuff. There we go. There's the news feed for the high resolution design. Well, my friends, that pretty much does it for the high-resolution design in terms of getting the initial round of formatting thrown in here. Of course, we still have those graphics that we've got to look after. Now, this is optional. You may decide that you want to go and adjust the menu items inside the footer. Maybe you want the menu items inside the footer to be slightly smaller than they appear inside the main navigation menu, which is a pretty common thing. Usually you have a smaller version of the main navigation menu down towards the bottom. So to pull something like that off, you might wind up doing, something like this. I'm going to head down towards the bottom of my high resolution media query. And there, of course, I have the footer nav, right? Well, I might wind up doing something like, let's see if we can get this to work. I might do something like footer, get this in here, footer nav LIA, something like this, okay? And then we might do something like font-weight, and then :space normal. That'll remove the bold from the menu items. Let's see what we get here. Go ahead and save and refresh. There we go, something like that. You might be happy with something like that. Or maybe you want to reduce down the font size. We could certainly do that as well. Font-size. The original nav menu was 15 pixels, so maybe we want to bring that down to maybe 12 pixels. You'll have to decide for yourself exactly how you want to do this, right? But the important thing is that you know how to do it, right? It's really just about isolating the area that you're after. So specifically here I've said, all right, it's the hyperlinks inside the list items, inside the nav element, inside the footer. There you go. The other thing, too, before I let you go here and before we move on to the next media query, the medium resolution media query, is again, all this extra white space that we have inside the code. I've just thrown it in here so you can kind of keep track of exactly what I'm doing, but in the real world, I would really want to collapse down a lot of this space, something like this. I'll leave that up to you to do on your side, but we really wouldn't want to have all this extra space. There we go. Maybe something more like this. So there we go. I hope you're happy with the the high resolution design, this initial round of design that we've applied to this guy. Of course, now we want to go after the next device, the medium resolution media query. Let's go and check that out. Things are looking really good here inside the high resolution version of our layout. Now we're ready to move on to the medium resolution version. So I'm just going to scale down the browser window here a little bit. You can go ahead and do the same there if you like. I'm actually going to make sure that the main navigation menu is indeed breaking onto multiple lines, and we'll see how that plays out. Okay, so maybe I'll wind up with something like this. All right, good stuff. Now let's get the design underway in this exercise, and then of course we'll take our top-down approach as always. So I'm going to head back into the external style sheet. I'm going to make sure that I am inside my medium resolution media query. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my font, and I'm going to change the border on the master. Okay, so I'm going to set the font in the body, okay, the redefined body element that is, at the top of the medium resolution media query. So I'm just going to drop my cursor there after the closing semicolon for the background, and I'm just going to go font-family, :space, and then Verdana. There it is. All right, now for the master, I want to change his border color. Okay, so look for his, well, look for the entire border property there, and look for the color there, the RGB color values that we had set earlier on, black, of course. And I'm going to change this to my mid-gray, 200, 200, 200, just like that. That's all we're gonna accomplish here in this exercise. Pretty easy stuff here. Go ahead and refresh, and there we go. There's our changes. So we can see the new font being applied throughout, and of course we can see the light gray border all the way around the entire layout. So we have things underway here very nicely. Now let's go after the header, and of course we'll work our way down the layout from there. Okay, let's go after the header. Now, before we actually go after the header, there's two RGB color values that we need to have handy. The background for the header, and we may as well grab the orange color for the main navigation menu. So if you don't have them still jotted down in front of you, once again, what you could do is you could have your medium resolution layout handy inside Photoshop, and then I showed you some options for figuring out your colors earlier on. For instance, you could grab your eyedropper tool just by tapping the I key on your keyboard and then sampling the blue there, for instance, and then heading into the foreground color swatch and getting the colors that way. You'll have to do the same for the orange as well, okay? Now, don't get stressed out too much. I have them all here for us, so I'll help us along. I'm more letting you know exactly how to extract your colors from Photoshop for your own projects, okay? So in any regard, what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to head all the way back to my external style sheet. Let's go after the header here initially. So there's my header inside the medium resolution media query. And of course, it's his background color that I'm after. Okay, so make sure you find that background color. And we're going to use the blue, which was 0, 80, and 125, just like so. Let's go and take a quick look at this guy here. Refresh. There it is. Perfect. All right. Do you want to tackle the main navigation menu here as well? We'll do the header and the nav menu all in one shot. What the heck? So let's head back over to our external style sheet. Now, the first thing that I want to do here is I want to find the nav, the actual nav bar itself, or the nav element, really. And I want to make sure that the text is aligned to the center. Okay, so I'm going to go text-align, and then center, followed by a semicolon, and you can go and check out those results inside the browser there. So there we go. There's the text nice and centered there. But we still have this gap of space on the left-hand side. Do you remember how we resolved that issue earlier on? Let me give you a hint here. It had something to do with WebKit. I'm going to scroll down into the high-resolution list of rules, and there, don't forget, or perhaps if you recall, we created a new rule called navul, and then he had this kind of funny-looking code here, WebKit padding start 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rule here from the high resolution media query, and I'm going to copy them, Controller Command C, and then what I'll do is I'll paste them into the medium resolution media query, something like this. Okay, so nav ul. And if you want, you can go and refresh your browser. There we go. Now our text is properly centered inside that navigation bar. Perfect. The only other thing that I want to do here is I want to get the hyperlinks inside the nav element under control. Give me a second here. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm just going to indent my nav li, and then after the nav li, I'm going to go nav lia. So that's our hyperlink inside a list item inside the nav. And let's go and set this guy up. So I'm going to go color, RGB. And so this is the orange color value that I'm going to use anyway, which is going to be 240 and 120 and 30, like so. Okay, there it is. I'm going to get rid of the underline by going text-decoration, and then I'll say none. Okay, that gets rid of the underline. Let's make this text bold as we did earlier by going font-weight, and then I'll simply type in bold. There we go. And let's see, I'm going to increase the font size as well, font-size. And earlier, for the high resolution, I believe I used 15 pixels, so I'm going to repeat that here as well. All right, go ahead and save up your work, and let's take a look at the browser. There we go, something like this. That looks much better, I think. But you know what I want to do as well? I'm going to throw in one more property, because this main navigation menu likely will break onto multiple lines, something like this, right? So what I want to do is I want to increase the amount of space between the lines of text, the vertical space. And this is a CSS property that we've already seen. He's called line height. Okay, don't forget, if you're coming from the world of print, this is the same as leading. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert some line height into the new rule that you and I just created, the nav lia. Okay, now how much line height should I use? Well, that's entirely up to you. You might have to experiment a little bit. I'm going to try 200%, and I'll see where that gets me. Okay, so give me a moment here. Refresh my browser there, something like that. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. You can fiddle with that value if you like. It's entirely up to you. But I think my navigation menu looks really good here, and looks like we're off to a really good start here with our medium resolution design. Let's keep moving here with our medium resolution design. Just like we did with the high resolution, I'm going to leave the slideshow for now. We'll come back to the slideshow. Okay, so let's skip ahead down to our 3 content boxes. Okay, and these are going to be super easy to set up, to apply formatting to. I'm going to head back to the medium resolution media query, of course, and let's see. I'm going to head down to content box. Now, the content box itself, all I want to do to him is I want to change his background to the same blue as the background that we're using for the header. So once again, that was 0, 80, 125. Now, the other thing that I want to do, just like we did with the high resolution, is I want to get the paragraphs inside the content box under control. Okay, so I'm going to use a compound rule to achieve that. Okay, and I'll just indent him here underneath content box. He's going to be .content box space P, obviously for paragraph. Okay, and let's see, I want to make the paragraphs inside the content box, I want to make them white. So I'm going to go 255, 255, 255 for their color. Okay. I'm going to reduce down their font size to 80%, okay, just like that. And I'm a little bit concerned about readability, especially on, a medium resolution device. So throwing in line height always makes text a little bit more readable, okay? So you can experiment with some different values. I'm going to try 180%, like so. All right, go ahead and save up your work and head back to your browser and refresh, and there we go. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Okay, so there's obviously the blue backgrounds in there, the white text, and the font size is just a little bit smaller, and we have lots of space between the lines of text, again, to increase readability. Okay, our medium resolution design is really coming together quickly, which is nice. we only have the news feed left and then the footer, assuming we want to make some adjustments to the menu items inside the footer. So why don't we finish things off with this exercise? In other words, finish off the medium resolution design, and then we can move on to the low resolution design. So I'm going to go after the newsfeed area, the articles first here. So give me a moment here. I'm going to head back over to the medium resolution media query. And let's see. I'm going to head down towards the sort of the area where I have the article and the news class rule there. And let's see, I'm going to go and create 2 new rules here, 2 new compound rules, just like we did before. News H2, all right, something like this. And remember what the other one was? It was news paragraph, or news and then P, right? Now, I'm going to pretty much make the same changes that we made earlier on with the high resolution. For instance, the news H2, I'm going to change his font. So I'm going to go font-family. There we go. I'm going to change that to Times, all right? And I'm going to set the margin bottom, there we are, to -20 pixels, okay? And let's see, I'm going to increase the font size as well. Font-size, and I'll try 200%, okay? So a scaling font size. Wonderful. All right, as far as the paragraph is concerned, I'm going to leave everything as is. The only thing I'm going to do is throw in the good old line height to help us out a little bit with readability. Okay, and I'm going to try 180% on this guy. Okay, let's see how this looks over inside the browser. Go ahead and refresh. There we go, something like that. So I think that looks pretty good, pretty readable. You might want to come back into the paragraph here and control the font size. That would be perfectly fine if you'd like to do that on your own. And then really the only other thing we have, as I mentioned at the beginning of the exercise, is the footer area. So once again, you could leave things as they are. That would be perfectly fine. I think I may leave things as they are, for myself anyway, because again, I'm thinking of someone viewing this layout on a tablet, and I don't want to have, crazy small text or anything like that, like I would have on a desktop layout, right? But you could certainly go and change that if you wanted to. You already know how to do that. If you're a little foggy on how we did that earlier on, if I scroll down into the high resolution media query, we created this guy, remember, to control the hyperlinks inside the footer area. So you could duplicate this, you could copy it and paste it into the medium resolution media query, and then perhaps do some adjusting from there. However, I will leave that up to you. I'm sure you're more than capable of pulling that off yourself. I'm going to leave things as they are right now. This is of course, our medium resolution media query, our medium resolution design. Looking really, really good here. It's really awesome to see everything coming together. Of course, we have one more layout to go, and that is the low resolution layout, and I'm excited to take care of this guy and then move into the subject of graphics. All right, with the medium resolution design complete, we are now ready to move on to the third and final design, of course, the low resolution design. Okay, so here we go. Make sure to scale down your web browser nice and narrow like I have here so we can get a good view of the low resolution media query. And, if it's all right with you, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of speed this up a little bit. We're going to be using a lot of the same CSS code that we've used already for both the high resolution and medium resolution, with perhaps a few minor tweaks here and there. But by and large, it's going to be pretty much the same code. We just have to make sure that we stick that code into the low resolution media query. So I'm going to head over to my external style sheet. And again, we got to be really careful that we don't confuse ourselves here. I'm going to scroll all the way up towards the top where I have my low resolution media query, of course. Now, as I have done twice already, all I want to do in this initial exercise is set the font and change the border color on the master div, right? Or the master ID selector. So what I'm going to do actually is cheat a little bit here and hopefully speed things up here a little bit. I'm going to head down to my medium resolution media query down towards the bottom of my screen. I'm going to grab his entire body. Okay, the whole shebang there, the background color, the font family. I'm going to copy them. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to find the body inside the low resolution media query, and I'm simply going to paste. Okay, something like this. All right. Hopefully no worries there. So really all we're doing is we're simply adding in the font family there, Verdana, for the body. Okay. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to change the border on the master. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find the master inside the medium resolution media query. I'm going to find his border property. There's the border and the values there. And there's the RGB color values that I used for the border, the light gray, right, or the mid gray, 200, 200, and 200. So I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to find the master inside the low resolution media query. And I'm going to find his border. And I will find his border color values and simply paste. Okay, so I'm just trying to speed things up here a little bit. Again, when we're doing this, we just have to be a little bit cautious that we're copying and pasting into the right places and so on. Okay, if you want to have a quick look at your browser, go for it there, quick refresh. There we go, we wind up with something like this. Okay, so there we go. That's the initial lesson, as always, out of the way here. Now, of course, we want to go after the header, the menu, and everything else that we have in here. Okay, so let's dig into it. All right, in a matter of moments, we're going to have our low-resolution design complete through the magic of copying and pasting. So here we go. I'm going to head over to my external style sheet, of course, and let's just be very careful about this. I mean, you might be kind of in a rush. Let's just do this, but we want to really just kind of have, again, that ounce of caution just to make sure that we don't completely destroy anything. So let's just do this kind of one piece at a time here. I'm going to go after the header next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find my medium resolution instance of header. There he is. Okay, I'm going to grab this fella and copy him. And then I'll scroll up towards the low resolution media query, and I'll find his header. And I will replace it, simply pasting over top of it, with the version of the header that I just copied from the medium resolution media query. So really all that's changing there is the background. We could have just selected the background color and copied it, but we grabbed the whole thing. All right, now what's next? I'm going to scroll back down into the medium resolution media query. I'm going to grab the entire navigation, the entire main navigation menu. So the nav element himself all the way down to that nav LIA. Okay, so make sure you're grabbing the appropriate content here. So the opening N in nav all the way down to the closing curly bracket for the nav LIA. Okay, just again, be careful that you're grabbing the right content here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that content that we just grabbed over top of the existing nav and nav li. Okay, so I'm just going to paste directly over top of it, just like that. Okay, let's see what we get here. I'm going to go and save up my work and head back to the browser and refresh. There we go. Something like this. Okay, so that looks really, really good, which is nice. All right, good stuff. So if you want, you can go and fiddle around a little bit with the size, perhaps, of your menu items, the vertical spacing between your menu items, and so on. I'm sure you're comfortable doing that on your own. The extra space on the left-hand side of the menu, that got taken care of when we pasted over this fella right here from the medium resolution media query into the low resolution media query. So that's looking great. That's fantastic. Okay, what's next? Well, the slideshow would be next, but we don't have a slideshow, and we've made sure that the slideshow is not going to display for the low-resolution devices. Okay, so we can move forward now into our content boxes. So I'm going to scroll down here, back down into the medium-resolution media query. In an attempt to save our fingers from lots of typing, let's just grab the content box and the content box P compound rule. Okay, grab these two lines of code, and we will copy them. And let's scroll back up to the low resolution media query and paste directly over top of the existing content box like so. All right, good stuff. Let's do a quick preview here inside the browser window. There we go. Perfect. Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty easy stuff. We're just grabbing the rules that we had previously, and we're dropping them into the low resolution media query. Okay. Now there are some adjustments that I'm going to make, by the way, to some of these rules in just a moment. Let's go and look after our news feed first, and then we'll go back to the low resolution media query and make a few minor changes. So let's finish things off here. I'm going to go back to the external style sheet. And this time I'm going to head into the medium resolution media query, of course, and I'm going to grab the entire article area. So the article itself, news, news H2, and news P, being sure to grab all of the rules there, including the closing squiggly brackets. And go ahead and copy those. And let's go and paste them up into the low resolution media query like so. Okay. There we are. Wonderful stuff. So that saves us quite a bit of repetitive typing, I think. So hopefully that's working out for you. Go ahead and refresh your browser, and this is what we wind up with. Once again, by the way, as a quick aside, if you want to go and monkey around with the footer, you know how to do that, right? So I will leave that up to you. Okay, so this is how our layout is going to look. Our design is going to look for low resolution devices. Now, I've decided to make a few changes to some of the CSS rules that are controlling the low resolution design. Okay, now this is entirely optional. It's entirely up to you, but I've decided to make a few changes. The first change that I'm going to make, it's a pretty minor change, but the actual menu items themselves. Okay, so once again, just make sure you're in the right spot here. This is the low resolution media query, and it's nav lia, okay? And I want to change his font size from 15 pixels. I'm going to bring that up to 20 pixels. Okay, so I'm just bumping up the font size just a little bit. Okay, let's see here. Maybe, I don't know, I might want to fiddle a little bit with the line height. Maybe I'll try bringing that up to 225. I don't know, maybe 215. You can fiddle with that if you want. Okay, and let's see, there was one other change that I wanted to make. It's for the paragraphs that appear inside my content boxes. So what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to take the font size there and I'm going to increase that to 100%, perhaps even a little bit higher, maybe 110, 115, something like that. Okay? But again, a lot of these values you're going to have to fiddle around with a little bit to see if you can get things looking nice for you. Okay? So this is how I've wound up here. All right, so the text is a little bit larger. Again, I'm thinking about usability and readability. I think maybe my font size is a little bit too large there, so maybe I could drop that down a little bit. So that was inside my nav lia, so perhaps instead of 20, maybe I could drop that down to 18. I might play with this a little bit more, but I think you kind of get the idea. Okay, more importantly, there's the low resolution layout, right? The low resolution design, and of course the medium resolution design. And if I can get this to cooperate, cranking all the way out, there's my high resolution design, all built into one CSS file and one HTML document. Pretty awesome stuff. So if you're liking this and you're still with me here, you're at the same point that I'm at here. Now, let's keep moving and let's go and insert some graphics into our high, medium, and low resolution layouts. Well, here it is, the final leg of our responsive web design journey. We've come a long, long way. This really is sort of, I don't want to say, it's the moment of truth, but here we are. This is sort of the final stretch where we want to go and insert the graphics into our responsive layout here. So the graphics that we're going to be inserting, this should be fairly straightforward. The graphics that we're after are going to be the logo, the slideshow, and then, of course, the 3 graphic headers for our 3 content boxes, okay? For all 3 devices, by the way. So what we'll do here is we'll get the graphics set up for the high resolution layout, and then we'll work on tweaking those graphics, adjusting those graphics for the medium resolution and also the low resolution. Okay, so I hope that sounds good to you. So what we're going to be doing here, this is going to be pretty cool. We're going to see a mixture of Photoshop and HTML and CSS. So our 3 primary tools are all going to be used practically simultaneously. So as a matter of fact, I'm going to start things off over inside Photoshop where I've gone and opened up the high resolution layout. Okay, so if you could go ahead and fire up Photoshop on your side and open up your high-resolution layout, that'd be great if you want to follow along here. And what I want to do is I want to isolate the logo. I want to extract the logo. Let me zoom in on this guy for us from our layout and get them into, of course, our high-resolution media query. That's really what we're after here. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can go about extracting content from Photoshop. For instance, we could slice apart our Photoshop layout. I don't know if you've ever done that before in the past or not. That's one option. Here's my preferred method, which I think is much, much simpler and also yields easier results, or results that are much easier to work with. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find the logo inside the layers panel. Okay, so he's inside the header area layer group, or the header layer group for myself. There he is. Now what I want to do is I want to disable the visibility of all of the layers inside my layout except for the logo. So to pull that off, I'm going to hold down Option here on the Mac or Alt on the Windows side and click the little eyeball icon there, the visibility indicator, and that will disable all of the layers except for the current layer. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool from the toolbox, and I'm simply going to click and drag out a selection all the way around my logo. You don't even have to be very careful. You just want to make sure that you're encompassing the entire logo. Okay, something like this. Good stuff. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the File menu, and rather than choosing Copy, I'm going to choose Copy Merged. Okay, what that means is it's going to grab all of the content that resides inside the selection from all of the layers. Okay, so go ahead and choose Copy Merged. All right, there it is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose File New. I'm going to create a brand new blank document here inside Photoshop. Photoshop already knows the dimensions of the logo, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. There we are. And then I'll paste Control or Command V, and there's our extracted logo. Perfect. Awesome stuff. Now next, what we want to do is we want to save this guy into a web-friendly file format. This isn't a workshop on, using proper file formats and image compression and all that great stuff. But the short and sweet is we have 3 file formats to choose from. We could go with JPEG, GIF, or PNG. I think I will go with PNG myself because I want to have a nice, crisp, high-quality looking logo, but I also want to retain the transparency. As we can see there, the checkerboard pattern behind the logo, I want to maintain that once I get the logo into my layout. So I'm going to go with PNG. So here's what I'm going to do. And again, there's lots of different ways to do this, but I'm going to go File, and then all the way down to Save for Web. Okay? And we get the massive Save for Web dialog box coming up. And over on the right-hand side, I'm going to change my file format. Specifically, I'm going to go with PNG24. Okay? Now, you're welcome to fiddle around with some of the settings that we have available. I'm going to accept all of the defaults here. And then way down at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. Now, I'm going to go and save this into my work files folder on my desktop. And very simply, I'm just going to call it logo.png. Okay, you can call it site logo or, houseofhorrors.png, whatever you want. I'm just going to keep it simple here and simply call it logo.png. Go ahead and save that up. Okay, great. There we are. So we have the logo extracted from the Photoshop layout. Now what we need to do is we need to go and drop the logo into the HTML file and then get them under control with some CSS inside our high-resolution media query. So that is coming up next. All right, we're ready to go and insert our logo into our code, our HTML code, and get them under control with some CSS. By the way, just a quick aside, the file that we're left with here inside Photoshop, in the real world, oftentimes I'll save this guy. I'll just choose File, Save As, and then save him, in my case, as a logo.psd. So in other words, I'll hang on to the original Photoshop version of the logo. But I think for now, I'm just going to close out of this guy. We don't need him. And when prompted, I'm just going to say don't save. So this is back into the high resolution layout, which we'll come back to in an upcoming exercise. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my code now. Okay, so head over to your coding application. I hope that you still have styles.css open there, as well as index.html. So if you don't have those files open, go ahead and open them now, okay, inside your coding application. Let's look after the HTML first. So inside the HTML file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look for my header. There he is right there up towards the top, okay? And it's inside the header where I want to go and insert the logo, of course, right? The logo sits inside the header. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my cursor in here, all right? And I'm going to insert my logo as follows. Open angle bracket IMG for image, space SRC for source, equals, and then in quotes, whatever you had called your logo file. So I called mine logo.png, close quote, close angle bracket, like so, okay? Now, this path, this source that we have here is what's referred to as a relative path. So if I had saved my logo into, for example, an images subdirectory inside my work files folder, inside my website folder, then I'd have to make sure to include that here, okay? But both index.html and logo.png reside inside the same folder, so I think I'm safe here. All right, good stuff. So that was the first step, getting the logo into the HTML file. Go ahead and save index.html. If you want, you can head back to your browser and refresh, Control or Command R, and you should get a logo now sitting inside your header, which is awesome. Okay, now if you didn't get a logo inside your header, just double check your code, double check the path, the source to your logo as well, okay? Watch your capitalization as well. Now here's the deal though, the only thing that I want to do here is I want to get this logo under the control of some CSS, as I had mentioned a moment ago, because in the original Photoshop layout, the House of Horrors logo was actually kind of dripping down into the main navigation menu. And as you can see here, he's kind of shoved way up to the top and also to the left there. So I want to get a little bit of spacing in there and kind of set him up the way that we had him back inside Photoshop. Okay, so again, the idea here is we want to try and replicate what we had created inside Photoshop as closely as we can. Thankfully, it's not too difficult. I'm going to head back over to my coding application. I'm going to head into styles.css. I want to make sure that I'm in my high-resolution media query. So that's all the way down at the bottom of the external style sheet. And let's see, I'm going to look for my redefined header. There he is. And I'm going to go and insert a new rule just beneath this guy. And this is going to be a compound rule. So what I'm going to say is, all right, if I have an image inside a header, something like this, then I want to do some stuff to it. Okay, so once again, sort of this idea of conditional formatting, right? So an image inside a header. Not all graphics, not all images inside my layout, just images that reside inside the header, okay? And here are the properties that I want to apply to the image that appears inside the header. I want to say margin left, and I'm going to try 20 pixels. That should be fine. And I also want to put some space on top. So I'm going to go margin hyphen top, and I'm going to say 10 pixels. That's it. That's all I want to do here. Okay, so just a little bit of space on the left and a little bit of space on top. Go ahead and save your external style sheet. Head back to your browser and refresh, and there we go. So now we have a gap of 20 pixels on the left, 10 pixels on top. The gap of 10 pixels on top pushes the logo down into the main navigation area, which is what I wanted. So you can fiddle around with the spacing values, by the way, the margin values that I had used here, but I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty darn cool. So there we go. There's the logo in place. Now let's move on to the slideshow. Okay, we're after the slideshow next. Let me just show you something here inside the browser quickly. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be inserting a static image here into the slideshow container. I know I've been referring to this as a slideshow all the way along, but unfortunately we just don't have enough time to create an actual self-running slideshow. But the good news is there are tons and tons of free scripts available online. You could jump into Google and do a quick search for, something like JavaScript, slideshow, or just type in free slideshow. There's lots of auto generators and things like this. So for our purposes, we're just going to be inserting a static image here. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to extract the slideshow graphic from the Photoshop layout. Okay. Just like we did with the logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to Photoshop. Now, the way that we left things here inside Photoshop, I still have the marching ants for the logo selection. And of course, all of the other layers other than the logo have been disabled in terms of their visibility. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's get rid of the marching ants by hitting Controller-Command-D on the keyboard to deselect. And then what I'll do is I'll hold down Option here on the Mac or Alt on the Windows side. And one more time, I'll click on the visibility icon, the eyeball icon there for logo, and that'll bring everything back to life. So as a quick aside, holding down Alt or Option and clicking on a layer's visibility is a way to isolate that layer and temporarily enable or disable the visibility of all the other layers inside the Photoshop layout. Pretty cool, okay? All right, now let's go after the logo, this fella here. So I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see the entire slideshow. And let's see, I'm just going to collapse down my header layer group. I'm going to twist open the slideshow layer group. Remember, we had set this guy up using a clipping mask. So here's what I'm going to do. This is another way to go about pulling this sort of thing off. I'm going to hold down Controller-Command, and I'm going to click on the clipping group layers thumbnail, this guy right here. So the cookie cutters thumbnail, if you will. Go ahead and click that. And that will load that layer as a selection, as marching ants. Perfect. All right, now once again, what I'm going to do, I don't need to disable any layers, visibility, or anything like that, because I have my selection here pretty tightly. I had to do that previously for the logo because I had some other objects in the way there, the main navigation menu and the blue background from the header and so on. But in any regard, here we're ready to roll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to the edit menu and then back down to this copy merged command, which comes in really handy. And then once again, I'm going to go and create a brand new document. I'm just going to hit Controller-Command-N on my keyboard. And once again, Photoshop knows the dimensions for us, which is great. 840 by, now it's giving me 301 here. So I'm going to fix that in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and then I'll paste Controller-Command-V. All right. Okay, there we go. So there's the slideshow. Now, it had given me an extra pixel in height for some unknown reason. If I zoom in just a little bit, I can see that extra pixel of space way down at the bottom of the layout, which is kind of weird, kind of bizarre. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fix this just by trimming a pixel off the bottom of this image. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to head to my image menu and then down to canvas size. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to shave a pixel off of the bottom. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set my anchor orientation, okay, either to the top left, top center, top right, doesn't really matter. And I'm simply just going to change my height from 301 to 300, because you and I both know that it's supposed to be 300, right? I'm not sure why we're getting that extra pixel. Go ahead and click on OK. Now Photoshop is going to say, oh, hold on, your new canvas size is going to be smaller. Go ahead and click on Proceed, and that'll crop that extra pixel off the bottom, which is great. Okay, now let's go and save this guy up. I'm going to use my Save for Web dialog box one more time. So File and then down to Save for Web. Okay, you can choose the file format that you want to save this guy as. You could go JPEG in this case. That would be perfectly fine. Or maybe myself, I'll stick with my PNG 24. It's entirely up to you. And again, this really isn't a workshop on optimizing graphics for the web, but probably what I would wind up doing is going with a JPEG just to get some smaller file size. Let me give you a very, very quick comparison here. If I go PNG 24, the quality here looks just fine inside this little preview window. Make sure you're on the Optimize tab, by the way. Looks pretty good in there, doesn't it? But if I look way down towards the bottom left corner, check out the file size, almost 500K. And you might go, 500K, that's nothing. Yeah, sure, it's nothing, but we could get it even smaller. Check this out. I'm going to switch out to JPEG, and now the preview still looks just as good, but the file size is way down to about 50K, just a little bit higher than 50K. So we've really shaved a ton of file size off of this guy, which is great. Now you might think, well, that's not really that big a deal. Well, what if you had 5 or 10 images on each page on your website, and you were able to save that much file size on each of your images? Suddenly, your website still looks great, all the images still look great, and it loads 2 or 3 times faster, maybe even 5 times faster, right? So anyway, you'll have to experiment with your different file formats. Really, it's all about the balance between quality and file size. We want good-looking images that are as small as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go with JPEG for this guy, and I'll go ahead and click on Save, and I'm going to call this slideshow.jpg, saving them, of course, into my work files folder. Okay, go ahead and click on Save, and there we go. We're ready now to go and insert this guy into our HTML. You can close out of the file here inside Photoshop. We don't need to save them. Now it's all about, of course, the HTML and the CSS to control the slideshow. All right, let's get the slideshow inserted into our HTML file. I'm going to head back to index.html, and this guy is going to be inserted into, of course, the slideshow div. Okay, this fella right here. And I'm going to insert them in exactly the same manner that you and I had inserted the logo. So I drop my cursor into the slideshow div, open angle bracket, img, space src equals, and remember what we called this guy? Slideshow.jpg, at least for myself. Perfect, good stuff. Go ahead and save up your HTML file there, and if you want to have a quick look inside your browser, go for it, refresh. There he is, perfect. It's really, really motivating and exciting to see the design really coming together, especially with the graphics, of course, right? Now, something that you may want to leave in, you may want to take out, notice that the slideshow container itself has a black border all the way around all 4 sides. If you want to keep that in, that's fine. If you want to get rid of that border, that's fine as well. We did not have a border over inside Photoshop when we originally designed the layout. So I think what I'll do is I'll remove the border, okay? So for now anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the external style sheet, into the high resolution media query. I'm going to look for my slideshow ID selector. It should be in there. And notice that there's no border on this guy here inside the high resolution media query. Kind of bizarre. What's actually happening is if I scroll up into my medium resolution media query, the border that we're seeing inside the high resolution layout is actually coming from the medium resolution's slideshow ID selector. Kind of bizarre. So in other words, this border property is showing through from the medium resolution media query. Okay? Kind of wacky, kind of bizarre. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find his border, and of course I'm going to select it and get rid of it. Now make sure you grab from the B there all the way down to the closing semicolon like so. And then save this guy up and head back to the browser and refresh. And there we go. Now the border's gone. Okay? So sometimes what winds up happening is you get these properties showing through from your other media queries. It can be a little bit tricky to diagnose, but in any regard, we have our border removed, which is great. Now we can move on to the 3 content boxes. So we're going to have to extract all 3 graphics and then insert all 3 graphics into our HTML and then get all 3 graphics under the control of our CSS. We're now ready to go after the 3 content box graphics and their titles, the experience, tickets and rates, and our location. So of course I'm back inside the high resolution layout inside Photoshop. Now this is going to be a little bit, I don't want to have you thinking this is going to be insanely complex. It's just going to be a little bit more involved because we have multiple objects that we want to make sure that we're pulling out of the Photoshop layout. So give me a second. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer. I'm going to get rid of my marching ants from earlier on just by deselecting Controller Command D on your keyboard. I'm going to go after the experience first. Okay, so once again, what I want to do inside the layers panel is I want to go and find that guy. Okay, And as a matter of fact, what I want to do is I want to disable some of the other layers. Now, what we can do in this situation is we don't have to disable all of the layers like we saw earlier on with the logo. We could just simply disable a few of the layers. Now, most importantly, what I want to do is I want to find that vector smart object for the experience. There he is. So I want to make sure that I'm going to extract that guy, as well as the Emily Dickinson photo, right? This guy as well. And don't forget, he had the layer effect applied to him as well, the stroke there. So what I want to do here is I want to disable the visibility of content box 1. That's the blue background. Okay, so I'm going to disable that guy. The other thing that I want to do is I want to disable the actual background layer all the way down at the bottom of the layers panel. Okay, so in other words, what I'm after is just the title and the graphic sitting on a transparent background. That's what I want. I'm going to tap the M key on my keyboard to flip me over to the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to very carefully select the experience and the Emily Dickinson photograph like so. Perfect. Make sure you encompass both objects in your selection. And you might have to take a couple of tries at it to make sure you have it properly, or you could throw down a selection and then you could go select and then down to transform selection, and then you could tweak your selection just a little bit to make sure you have everything in there, maybe something like that. Okay, hit enter to lock that in. So we're ready to extract this material now. Once again, it's not going to be a straight copy and paste, it's going to be a copy merged, okay? So once again, this is a great example of using this copy merged command, grabbing multiple layers now. This is the first time that we've grabbed multiple layers using the copy merged, all right? Controller Command N on your keyboard or File New. Hit Enter on your keyboard to create the new file and paste. Controller Command V, and there we go. There's the first graphic that we're after. Wonderful stuff. All right, now we've seen this a number of times already. I'm going to use my Save for Web command underneath the File menu. Now, this time I'm not going to go with JPEG because JPEG doesn't support a transparent background. So I've got to go with a PNG24, which is going to result in a higher file size, a larger file size, but I really do want that transparency there, okay? All right, good stuff. Go ahead and save this guy up. Now, you could call this the experience if you wanted to, the experience.png, or maybe for myself, I'm just going to call this contentbox1.png, okay? And I'll go ahead and save that guy, and there we are. We have our graphic extracted. We're now ready, of course, to go and drop them into the code. However, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of this file here. Now, once again, in the real world, I'd probably hang on to this guy just in case I need him, but I'm going to close out of him here. And I'm not going to bother saving. Now what we want to do, before we actually go and get the experience into our code, is we want to go and extract tickets and rates, and also the guy right next door to him, our location. So let's extract these two guys, and then we'll get all three inserted into our code and under the control of CSS all at the same time. Okay, let's go after our two remaining content box graphics. Of course, tickets and rates and our location. So really, this is going to be pretty much the same process that we just saw in the previous exercise. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go and find the content that I'm after, the tickets and rates and the graphic as well. So that's going to be inside content box 2 or the content box 2 layer group. So go ahead and twist that guy open. Once again, what I want to do here is I want to disable the visibility of the content box 2 layer itself, the blue background. And what's cool here about using this copy merged command is it really doesn't matter which layer you have selected inside the layers panel. Here I have the content box 2 layer group selected. I still have the rectangular marquee tool activated. So quite literally, I'm just going to click and drag out a selection around the tickets and rates title, as well as the Kawanja graphic there as well. Okay, so I'm also capturing the image, the photograph, and don't forget this guy was set up using a clipping group, so I'm grabbing that. I'm grabbing the stroke that's applied to the clipping group as well. So basically everything that sits inside my marching ants I've got selected here. And once again, we're going to head up to the edit menu and down to copy merged. Let's go and create our brand new blank file by hitting Control or Command N on our keyboard and then pasting our copied content in. There we go, perfect. And then let's save this out. So once again, File and then down to Save for Web. Now I'm going to be sticking with the PNG 24 file format for myself, again, because I want that transparent background there, okay? So I'm going to go and save this out. And I think I'll stick with my naming convention here. So I'm going to go Content Box 2, being careful not to use spaces. Okay, there we go. We only have one more to go. And again, it's going to be pretty much the same process here. So you can go ahead and head back to your high resolution layout. And of course, now it's our location that I'm after. So give me a second to go and isolate that content, disabling the correct layers there, and then making my selection. Just like that. Okay. Again, as I had mentioned quite a while back, there are several ways to go about extracting content from Photoshop, but I find this to be the most direct way, the fastest way here. As you can see, using a lot of keyboard shortcuts to go and create this content, get this content set up. All right, there we go. Let's go and save this guy out. This is going to be a PNG 24 once again, and this is going to be Content Box 3. Content Box 3. There we go. Perfect. All right, good stuff. So we are ready now to go and insert these 3 extracted graphics into our HTML and, of course, get them under control with our media queries. Okay, let's go and get these guys into our HTML. So I'm just going to flip back over to my code view, and I'm going to head into, of course, my HTML document. Now, these 3 graphics are going to sit inside our content boxes. Okay, so look for the content box divs. Now, we have to be pretty careful about exactly how we're going to go and insert these guys. I want my images inside the content box div, of course, as I just mentioned, but I want to insert them before the placeholder paragraph. Okay, so drop your cursor just before that opening paragraph tag there inside the content box div. Okay, right in there is what we want. And here we go. Open angle bracket, IMG, space SRC equals, and then in quotes, remember what you called yours? I called mine content box 1.png. Okay, close quote, close angle bracket. Now, as a matter of fact, in an effort to speed things up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this code that I just typed out, which of course is going to drop my image in there, and I'm going to copy that, and then I'll paste them into the other 2 content boxes just like so, being very careful to drop my cursor in the correct spot first before pasting, okay? And myself, I had used this content box naming convention, so I'm just going to change the names here, content box 2, and then of course content box 3. All right, for yourself, if you actually called it ourlocation.png or ticketsandраtes.png, you're going to have to go and change each of the image sources. All right, there we go. Go ahead and save up your work. If you want to have a quick look at your browser, go ahead and refresh. There we go. So if you have 3 new images sitting inside your layout, awesome stuff. Good job. Now, we just want to do a little bit of formatting on these images just to control the spacing a little bit. Okay, this is actually going to be really, really easy stuff. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get my images under control, but only if they reside inside a content box. Okay, so this is going to be very similar to how we got the logo under control. So in other words, what I'm going to do over inside my external style sheet, inside my high resolution media query, is I'm going to create a compound rule. So I'm going to look for content box down towards the bottom of my external style sheet. And just before the content box P compound rule, I'm going to go and insert a new compound rule called content box space IMG. Okay, there we go. And let's see, all I want to do with these guys is I want to pull them above let me kind of try and explain this to you here inside the browser. I want to pull them above the top edge of these blue content boxes. Once again, just like we had inside the Photoshop layout. So I'm going to go margin hyphen top, full colon space, and I'm going to use a negative value, minus 20 pixels, something like that. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to find the actual content box class rule, And I just want to double check that. I think I put this in here. There's his margin that we have a top value of 10 pixels. We may have to adjust this value. So don't forget it goes top, right, bottom, and left. So we might have to come back and adjust that value. Go ahead and save up your external style sheet for now, and let's head back to the browser and refresh. There we go, something like that. So the good news is that the three, let's call them title graphics, are indeed spilling off of the top edge of our three content boxes, but you can see now they're kind of cramming into the bottom edge of the slideshow. So that's why I went and pointed out this value here, the margin top value for content box. So let's try increasing this from 10 to 20. Go ahead and save and then refresh. There we go, something like that. So what we've done here is we've just pushed the blue boxes an extra 10 pixels down the page like that. Okay, so now we don't have, content cramming into other content, this sort of thing. So there we go. There's our three graphics. Looks absolutely awesome. Wonderful stuff. Hey, congratulations if you made it this far. Things have really, really come together nicely for us. There's our entire high-resolution layout. Now, the good news is, by the way, that we have all of the heavy lifting finished. We got all the content extracted from Photoshop. We got it inserted into the HTML as well. The high-resolution design is complete as far as we're concerned. So now all we have to do is get our graphics under control via CSS for our medium resolution. You can see things start to fall apart there as soon as I start to collapse my browser. And then, of course, for the low resolution as well, we've got to get that under control as well. So all we have to do now is get the two remaining media queries, the two remaining device resolutions under control as far as our images are concerned, and then we're finished. All right, so we have a little bit more work ahead of ourselves in terms of getting our images and our overall layout formatting nicely for our remaining media queries, the medium resolution and the low resolution. So what I'd like you to do is make sure that you have adjusted the width of your browser window. Now, notice that the formatting on the logo has been removed as soon as we break into the medium resolution media query. Notice, too, that this is probably most obvious, is the slideshow breaks the entire layout, right? So we've got to do something about the slideshow. I've got a really cool trick to show you there. And also we're having issues with our three content boxes in terms of how everything is sitting there. So let's get to work here. I'm going to go after the logo first, which is going to be a really, really easy fix. All we're going to do is throw in some spacing there. So I'm going to head back to the external style sheet, and I'm going to go and find, of course, the medium resolution media query now. And I'm going to look for my header, and I'm going to go and insert a new compound rule underneath header. If you're thinking header image, then you're absolutely bang on the money. And here's what I'm going to do. Margin hyphen left, full colon space. I'm going to say 20 pixels. And then I'm going to throw some margin onto the top. Margin hyphen top, full colon space, 10 pixels. You, of course, are welcome to try out some different values. Okay? I'm going to head back to my browser and refresh. And there we go. There's the logo under control. Now, most exciting here is going to be the slideshow. This is a really cool trick that I want to show you for getting the slideshow under control. What we can do is we can actually get the slideshow to scale depending on the overall width of the layout. Okay, so of course the high resolution layout is a fixed width. The medium resolution layout is scalable. So we're going to get the slideshow graphic itself to be scalable as well. Here's how we're going to pull it off. So I'm going to head back to the external style sheet. I'm going to go and look for the slideshow inside the medium resolution media query. And let's see here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the height on the slideshow. So right now it says height 300 pixels. I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to go and create a new compound rule underneath slideshow. And I'm going to call him $slideshow space img. So an image inside my slideshow. And here's what I'm going to do with this guy. I'm going to say width, full colon space, 100%. In other words, a scalable width. Let's see if this works. Go ahead and save up your file there, head back to your browser and refresh Controller Command R. The slideshow instantly scales down, which is great. So now if I expand my browser window or collapse them down, you can see that the width of the slideshow and the height of the slideshow both scale. You have to remove that height of 300 pixels, otherwise this isn't going to work properly for you. Okay, so there you go. Isn't that cool? Scaling images, pretty awesome stuff. I suppose I could do the same thing with my logo as well. You could quite literally have a scaling logo using the exact same method. It's a pretty cool technique. All right, now we only have our content box images left. We have to decide how we want to handle this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set it up so that the graphic itself is going to sit over on the left-hand side as it is, and I want the text, rather than appearing beneath the graphic, to appear over on the right-hand side of the graphic. Here's how I'm going to pull it off. Back inside the external style sheet, I'm going to go and look for my content box, and of course I have the content box P compound rule beneath him. I'm going to go and create a new compound rule between the two called content box image, of course. There we go. And let's see here. I want to float this guy. We talked about floating quite a while back. I'm going to say float left, and I'm going to say margin right. So I want to put a little bit of gap of space on his right-hand side. I'm going to try 10 pixels worth of space. Go ahead and save and head back to your browser and refresh. There we go, something like this. So this is how I'm going to treat my content boxes here, at least for the medium resolution. You'll have to decide for yourself exactly how you want to handle it. The tricky part being that we really don't know the exact resolution that's going to be used. So our layout could look something like this, or it could look something like that. We really don't know. Okay, so at some point you kind of have to, I don't want to say that you have to abandon it, but you have to be sort of happy with sort of either of these scenarios that we're seeing here, any of the scenarios that we're seeing here. Okay, so there we go. And of course we see those changes happening throughout the other two content boxes. All right, so there we go. There's the formatting of the graphics for our medium resolution layout, which is wonderful stuff. Now, of course, I want to collapse down my browser window all the way down to my low resolution layout. And now we've got to decide how we want to handle things here for the final media query. Okay, we're ready for the third and final media query, the third and final device, of course, the low resolution device. You're going to have to make some design decisions, by the way, as we work our way along in terms of how we want to handle things, okay? So I'm going to throw a set of ideas at you. You're more than welcome to run with them, or perhaps you want to try using your own settings, your own ideas. That's, of course, perfectly fine as well. The idea, the thought that I'm going to bounce off of you right off the bat relates to the logo, okay? Now, way back when we were designing our low-resolution layout inside Photoshop, I had made the design choice to center the logo, okay? Now, you can take that and run with it, or you can go and set up your own options, whatever it is that you want to do here. So what you may want to do as well, by the way, is you may want to have the low-resolution design open inside Photoshop, once again, as a reference that you can go back to. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to go and center the logo. And of course, this is going to happen inside the external style sheet. Now inside the low resolution media query up towards the top of our external style sheet. Now to center the logo, this might take a little bit of effort here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the header element itself, okay, or the redefined header element. And I'm going to add in the following property. I'm going to go text-align, :space, and then center. Let's save that and see what we get inside our browser. Go and refresh. There we go. So now the logo is going to be centered inside the header. Again, if that layout scales, back and forth, this kind of thing, so long as I don't break into the medium resolution device or media query, the logo at the top of the layout is going to be centered. But what I do want to do is I want to get some spacing above this guy to push him down into the menu just a little bit, just so he kind of goes along with the formatting for our other devices. So back inside the external style sheet, what I'll do very quickly here is I'll create our header image compound rule once again. something like this, and I'll just throw on a bit of margin top onto this guy. And I'll try 10 pixels. And let's go and see how that looks. There we go, something like that. So now he's centered and he's dripping down into the main navigation menu. So pretty cool stuff. There we go. Wonderful. So there's the logo. And again, you can take that and run with it, or you can do something different, whatever you want to do there. Now, of course, we don't have a slideshow inside the low resolution media query. Wonderful. So we don't have to worry about that. There is no slideshow here. So I'm going to jump right ahead to our 3 content boxes, the experience, tickets and rates, and of course our location down towards the bottom. This is another area where you're going to have to decide how you want to handle this. What you see right now inside your low resolution media query or your low resolution device might be just fine with you. You might look at this and go, yeah, it looks great. You know, I know that there's some extra space happening in here, but I'm fine with that. I'm really not too concerned about that. Or maybe you want to do something similar to the content boxes as we had just done with our logo. Maybe you want to take these graphics that we inserted, the title graphics, and maybe you want to center them as well. And I think that's what I want to do here. Okay, so I think I want to center my content boxes. So here's what I'm going to do. Back inside, once again, of course, the external style sheet, I'm going to go and find the content box class rule for make sure you're in the low resolution media query, of course. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to throw in that text align center onto this guy. Text hyphen align, full colon space center, okay, followed by a semicolon. Let's save that up and head back to our low resolution media query or low resolution device and refresh. There we go. So now we have the graphics centered, which I think kind of looks a little bit nicer than what we had previously. So this could, again, scale way down, something like that, right? I think that looks a lot better. But the other thing that I think I want to do is I think I want to pull these guys up above the blue content boxes, just like we had done previously in our other layouts. The other problem, too, is that because we said that the content of the content boxes should be centered, the paragraphs are also centering, which I don't think I like. So we have a little bit more work that I want to do here. So let's see. I'm going to flip back over to my external style sheet. Let's go and fix the centering issue first. So I'm going to find content box P, and here's what I'm going to do. This is in the low resolution media query, don't forget. I'm going to go text hyphen align, full colon space, and I'm going to say left. All right, so that should fix the text alignment. And I said that I wanted to put a little bit of space above I wanted to have the content box images kind of spilling off the top edge of the content boxes. So here's what I'm going to do. Underneath content box, I'm going to go dot content box img, okay? And then let's try going margin hyphen top, and it's going to be a negative value. We might have to experiment with some different values here. I'm going to try -20. That might be too much. Let's see what we get here. Go ahead and save up your work and head back to your browser and refresh. Something like that. Okay, great. They're spilling off the top edge, which is great. But now they're kind of running into, well, some of them are running into the others there. So what we'll have to do here, once again, there's quite a bit of back and forth here. What we'll have to do is we'll have to take, let's see, our content box. This is in the low resolution media query. We had to do this earlier. We have to add some margin top, okay? Now, I don't have a margin top value defined as I had earlier. I just have margin bottom here. So I'm going to throw in margin hyphen top, and I'll try 10 pixels. Now, one of the reasons, by the way, why I'm going a little bit faster here and we're kind of fiddly here, monkeying around with different settings and trying some different things, is this is really what it's all about. You really have to get in here and just kind of fiddle around and see if you can get things, sitting the way you want. I threw in that margin top, and I'm really not seeing a result there. So maybe what I'll do is I'll try increasing that maybe to 20 pixels, or maybe I could wind up using my margin bottom. Oh, there we go. That worked for me. Increasing that to 20. There we go. But you don't have to do this. I mean, I'm just kind of fiddling around here, seeing the different results that I could get here. So it's entirely up to you. Maybe you were happy with how this was looking by default, right? Here's something else that you may want to fiddle with on your own. I'm going to leave this up to you, but notice the logo is now spilling outside the edge of the low resolution media query. If I crank down the the width of my browser window too small. So maybe I want to set it up so that the logo scales as well, which you know how to do because you saw it with the slideshow. Okay. So to finish things off, there's the low resolution media query. Of course, the low resolution design looks awesome. Let me increase the width of my browser window. There's our, you could call it your tablet view or your medium resolution media query. Looks great as well. And then, of course, if I crank out the width of my browser window right across my screen here, and let me just refresh. There we go. There's our high resolution design, our high resolution media query as well. Looks absolutely awesome. Well, that was awesome. I hope you enjoyed that. We had so much to cover, so much ground to cover. As I mentioned way back at the beginning of the course, I really wanted to put together something as close to real world as possible. That's why we got started inside Adobe Illustrator, and we worked through that wireframe process and then moved into Photoshop and then finally into the world of code. So I hope you really enjoyed that. Lots and lots of stuff there for you to dig into. So here's a quick recap. Here's what we've learned together over the last several hours. We started off by making sure that we understood exactly what responsive web design was. We saw some examples as well of some really nicely designed responsive websites. And then, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we got started inside Adobe Illustrator. We built our 3 responsive wireframes inside Illustrator. We got them all set up there. Then we took those 3 wireframes and one at a time we got them into Photoshop and we applied design to those wireframes, of course, fonts, colors, and graphics. And I hope I was able to give you lots of techniques for working more efficiently inside Photoshop, lots of keyboard shortcuts, obviously very layers panel intensive there as well, and also hopefully some techniques and tricks for speeding up the design process with multiple files in Photoshop. Now, once we finished things up inside Photoshop, we moved over to the world of code, and we set up and we tested our HTML, our external style sheet, our CSS, and of course the media queries. And I really wanted to build all of that by hand so that you could see exactly how everything fit together, how all the pieces fit together. We then constructed the high, medium, and low resolution layouts inside code. And of course, that was all driven by our 3 media queries. And then we used our media queries and, of course, our CSS, and I also wanted to include some CSS3 to format the responsive designs. And then we jumped back into Photoshop, extracted our graphics. We talked a little bit about file formats, and you saw how to get your graphics into your code and get them formatted via CSS. So I hope you enjoyed. That was a lot of fun. Again, we covered a lot of ground. I hope you enjoyed. For VTC, this is Jeff Blake signing off. Happy responsive design adventures. I'll see you on the web. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have been working in the software industry and the training industry for over 10 years. I started way back when. And I started off by teaching in the classroom, and I would travel all over the place, teaching different groups of people on the corporate level. Lots of fun. And that led into writing books about web design and this sort of thing. And that, of course, led into creating training material, much like this, video-based training material. So that's lots and lots of fun, and that occupies a lot of my time. I also write the odd article here and there. You can catch up with me at 10tonbooks.com if you wish. And you can also check me out at jeffblake.ca, and feel free to fire an email if you wish. You can find me at jeff@10tonbooks.com.